New patch is here, and that of course means new completely meta. Firstly, we're gonna look at some decks that caught my eye and that I think are pretty good. And then we're gonna talk about the meta as a whole, and maybe some decks that I didn't include in this video, but I think they're also good. So let's look at it. First, we have very similar decks, and that's Janna Nilah and of course Janna Teemo. Decks that we know from the past, from the last season that we had them. Janna Nilah, I don't think there's much to add on. I think this deck is in meta for like a month now, so I'm not gonna much adding on this. I just like this deck list. I do like heavy meta. I think heavy meta is very smart into things like Atox, Kane, and of course into things like Jackson. Of course, amazing addition. But if you want to maybe a little bit more, I made like the guide on Janna Samira that is very similar to this version. It's like more about the value, and honestly, I enjoy it a little bit more. But objectively, the better version that's doing even better, at least even more straightforward, is the Janna Teemo. If you haven't seen this Janna Teemo version, it's very different from the other Janna decks, even though it's playing a lot of same card that it used to. It's using the classic Janna package with, Janna, Cloudwinder, and of course Mariner, and Maria, for example. But it's having different win condition in elusive. Of course, elusive, and especially Icon with champion strength is something that is just so powerful that it's just gonna win you the game. As well, champion strength with quick attack units that you have, Cloudwinder or Mariner, is also very powerful. Also, this Demaster version allows you to play form up. So you have also protection for your Janna Wincon. So that's also something that is a little bit different on this version that, it's not easy to deal with your Janna as it is in different versions. To do the to mention when Janna Teemo differs from things like Janna Nilah or Janna Summer is that your mulligan isn't that all in on Janna as in the other versions. And you are like more free to keep things like Icon, of course, maybe like with Icon, you can keep things like CS. So yeah, Icon tends to be usually the very important thing. As well, something to mention, you are much lower to the curve. You don't play things like both as Janna Nilah does. So the second usually get behind on the board, or like your opponent gets big avalanche or some AoE effect on you, you tend to not get back to the game as well as other versions. But of course, that comes with the advantage that you very often just kill the opponent on turn 5 because you just CS on them and you with 6 whiteboard, right? And also something to mention, you play much less burn. So also, finding the over the top leaders is much, much harder. But overall, I would say the version is doing better. I don't like it that much, but I think it's just because the combination of straightforwardness as well, not that much agency with this Teemo Janna version. It happened. Jack Sett is finally a good deck, I would say. This deck had always a kind of issue. It was from the past. Of course, it got so many buffs, but it had always a issue that it ran out of value. And that was like a kind of issue that was very hard fixable because you like had place your bets, and that was all that you kind of had in your regions. But now, thanks to the addition of course, both being actually both and drawing your jack, and Vikash, that of course gives you the slipstream, it's just feeling so much better. Of course, the biggest MVP that I would say is Medal Babs getting at you. At first, I was looking at this buff like, what error? But something that I just figured out later is that you can play Medal Babs on turn 2. And of course, if you didn't play anything on turn 1, that's even impossible with this version. You can play instantly Barnacles and becoming 2-4, Brash. And from the 2 and 2, you can start stacking your coins very effectively while also having very effective unit. If you don't have Barnacles itself, you of course can play Mistfall that draws you them, and then if you equip Meadow Babs, it's becoming 4-4. Like this buff on Meadow Babs just made this deck itself just go and be so good. As well, I think people kind of forget how Jake is good when he has deck built around him. Because when you're able to abuse the new healing, or new, right? We have it for some time in the game, but it's still kind of new. It's just crazy, and like it's very hard to deal with. And of course, Sett, I would still arguably say one of the best champions. But of course, Arena has currently some issues. But especially this deck is so often able to flip him on turn 7, and it just goes crazy. I'm very surprised with that, and especially the board buff was so big because very often you play board on 7, you coin, you play Jack, that you just do. And of course, that's 12 mana already, so your Jack comes leveled. And then, because you got the price fight, every price fight from Jack creates you 2 coins. So, you're gaining that mana on that. As well, you can able to heal him with the coins then. It's very cool deck. It's very fun. It's having some issue into like some spell slinger decks. If you're gonna meet some Janna, if you're gonna meet some Seraphine, you're not gonna be having that much fun. But the second you meet some mid-range decks, you're gonna be, ruling. You're gonna be doing very well. Into things like Aatrox skin and stuff, you just doing so well. And even in things like Jackson, I just do think that thanks to the things like Tagout and Palm, you are just doing very well. Deck to definitely try and deck to definitely look out for. It's not showing that crazy numbers, but I think also it's kind of made because there's a lot of players playing it currently. As well, we need to find maybe a little bit better version, but I wouldn't be surprised if this becomes maybe some meta stable eventually. You might have been asking, where's the spice? And of course, the spice is here. Gnar Darius is one of the best decks that I would recommend because how well it does into the meta. There's a lot of Janna decks, there's a lot of like, Aatrox Kane, and these decks just cannot do anything about this. When you just go big unit like Darius or Gnar level 2, you put Butterfree on it, you just kill your opponent. And that's, of course, the correct formula that we know from the past. And it's just doing well. Especially as set into the Janna. Janna cannot do anything about big units. Uh, Especially when you meet things like Janna Teemo, you have newly buffed Omen that's able to block these elusives. So that matchup is so amazing. And when you combine it with more overwhelm tools, like this is a mana rare, of course, because if you stun the blocker, of course, your overwhelm +2 gets in. And now, newly buffed or like newly added Sky Splitter as well. This deck just feels good. It's just straightforward, go face and kill your opponent. Of course, if you're gonna meet something like Arena, you're not gonna be having that much fun. So Janna, Seraphine, or any other Arena decks, stun Suicos are not something that you are a fan of. Though you can still definitely steal this game because you just play good unit into good unit, and that just also works. Amazing deck, something to definitely look at. And I wouldn't be surprised if this was like maybe not only a ladder, maybe spice, but even tournament spice. Well, this deck had to be mentioned. Jackson is probably still the best deck. It had two adjustments, of course, in the patch notes. It was Omen now being able to block elusive, so big buff for Jackson because Jackson, you know, weakness was kind of elusives, and of course nerfed Blacksmith. Even though I think still Blacksmith is a very good card, so I still am at 3-off. I was thinking about maybe 2-offing, but that's something I didn't want to touch on that much yet. Deck just feels amazing. You're gonna do so well into against Janna decks because you just put big bodies as well. You're having ways how to kill your opponent Janna, and now especially into against things like Janna Teemo, you're able to block with Omen, of course. So it's just crazy. I don't know what too much add on. We have this deck in game for 6 months. So I think if you haven't seen this deck, you can find some degates on it, but it's very straightforward, very strong. And if you want some LP, this is the way to go. Well, the meta so far feels pretty good. Of course, we have some new things. I think Set was mentioned. I was thinking about it. I think the deck is good, but of course, it's possible that it's a little bit worse than I think myself. Aatrox Scale is something that a lot of people were very hyped about, but I don't think the deck is good. I always had kind of issue with the Aatrox Scale, and I think the issues are still there. It's like that you're so dependent on like LA units. If you don't get units, then like you have very often like hand like weapon Kane weirder, and it's so weird that I'm just not fan of Aatrox Kane, and I would say that Aatrox Vayne is still a better way if you want to play Aatrox. Of course, both Janna decks that we mentioned today, Janna Nilah, Janna Teemo. Janna Teemo doing a little bit better, while Janna Nilah having a little bit more presence. A deck that I was thinking about including is Janna Seraphine, a deck that, of course, is using Janna Seraphine in different way. This deck is very specific in that it's beating things like Jackson, it's beating things like Aatrox Kid, it's beating Sett, it's beating the Gnar Darius that we saw today. Only flaw of this deck is that it's very inconsistent and it's losing to other Janna decks. And that's something that I didn't want to mention because of that. Because I think if you go on ladder now, you should be kind of doing well into Janna Teemo and Janna Nila. Because, if you count the presence, it's like 13%. And like, that's something that you just don't want to be like, I'm losing to them. So that's why I didn't mention it. But I would definitely keep eye on it for tournaments, or maybe if the meta develops in the way that the Janna deck's gonna go down. That's been the meta. Of course, we are like 2 days in the patch, so it's very, very early. So if you're looking at this video like week later, like, even 5 days later about this video, I might have maybe updated it with new video. So we're gonna see how it develops. So far, it seems pretty good, but of course, man, I'm sick of Jackson already. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Have an amazing day and see you in the next video. Okay, goodbye.